Hello and welcome back to Bioclass Bites. In this video, we are going to talk about meristems and plant tissues. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. These are the unit and lesson titles for this video series. And in this video, we are going to focus on meristems and plant tissues. In our previous video, we have identified the general characteristics of plants. Plants belong to kingdom Plantae and they refer to any multicellular eukaryotic organisms. They're capable of photosynthesis, in which chemical energy is produced from raw materials such as water, minerals, and carbon dioxide, okay, with the help of pigments, specifically chlorophyll, and the radiant energy coming from the sun. They have cell walls made up of cellulose that makes them rigid when filled with water. Plants also are capable of unlimited growth at localized regions, and this is the main topic of this video today. They do not have organs for locomotion, making them rooted to their spot. They do not have nervous systems, and their life cycles show alternation of generation between haploid and diploid states. So again, this is the overview of a typical flowering plant. Everything that you can find below the soil is part of the root system. Everything above the soil is part of the shoot system. So what makes plants capable of unlimited growth at localized regions? It is because of their meristematic tissues. These are lumps of small cells with dense cytoplasm and proportionately large nuclei that act like stem cells in animals. So in animals, we call those cells capable of differentiation as stem cells. In plants, we call them meristematic cells. If you still remember your lesson on cell cycle, one cell divides to give rise to two daughter cells. In plants, one of those daughter cells remain to be meristematic, okay, or the ones that continuously divide, while the other one is free to differentiate or become any part of the plant body and contribute to the health of the plant. In this way, the population of meristem cells is continuously renewed. So to learn more about it, I recommend that you watch this video entitled What are Meristematic Tissues? I'll provide the link in the description below. So how does it look like? So this is the meristematic cell or the meristem cell, which will undergo cell division. Now, the two daughter cells, you can see here, will have different fate. Okay, one of them will become a differentiated cell. So this could become part of the root, part of the stem, part of the leaves or flowers. Well, the other one will continuously become the meristematic cell or the meristem cell. So for every cell division, out of the two daughter cells, one will continue and become a meristematic cell. Only the other one will become a differentiated cell. So for every cell division, half of the population will continue on and become or will persist as meristem cells. Molecular genetic evidence supports this hypothesis that stem cells and meristems may also share some common molecular mechanisms. So the elongation of both root, okay, so that's found beneath the soil, and shoot above the soil take place as a result of repeated cell division. So this is what I was talking about. And subsequent elongation of the cells produced by the apical meristem. So we will learn more about it as we go along. So in some vascular plants, including shrubs and trees, lateral meristems, okay, so this is still product of this, produce an increase in girth. So again, half of the population that undergo cell division will continue on and persist as meristem cells. Only the other half will differentiate and become other different parts of the plant body. Different meristems generate new cells for primary and secondary growth. So in plants, we have two types of growths, primary and secondary. Primary growth refers to the growth in length, okay? And we owe that to the apical meristems. And we have two types of apical meristems. Those that are found beneath the soil is called the root apical meristems, and they are the ones who give rise to the roots of the plant. Well, the shoot apical meristem is found on the tip of the shoot system, and this one is where the rest of the plant body is generated from. So the primary growth of plants refer to their growth in length. So elongation above and below the soil. Below the soil due to root apical meristems, above the soil due to the shoot apical meristems. The second type of plant growth is called the secondary growth, and this is the growth in thickness, okay? So the growth in thickness is made possible by the lateral meristems, okay? So again, primary growth, root apical meristem, shoot apical meristem, secondary growth due to lateral meristems. And we have two major tissues for that, the vascular cambium, which will give rise to the xylem and phloem for the transportation of water and food throughout the plant body, and the core cambium, which will give rise to that layer of cells that will protect the plant. Okay, so again, meristems generate new cells for primary growth or the growth in length, and secondary growth, the growth in thickness. Apical meristems are located at the tips of the stems. Okay, tip of the stems, apical meristem, and tips of the roots, apical meristem. So root apical meristem. Okay, so the elongation of this apical meristem outward and downward is known as the primary growth and gives rise to the primary plant body. Okay, so during periods of growth, the cells in the apical meristems divide and continually add more cells to the tips of a seedling's body. Okay, so this allows them to lengthen. Okay. So we have here microscopic views of the shoot apical meristem, so you can find it here. So this is the upward growth of the plant. Okay, you're found on the tip of the plant of the plant body's shoot system. So you can find here actively dividing cells on the tip, and then for the root tips, you can find here root apical meristem actively dividing cells. Okay, so this will keep on dividing, pushing it downward to elongate the root. This will keep on dividing, pushing it upward to elongate the shoot. So if apical meristems were for the plant growth, primary plant growth, okay, so if that's the only one that's dividing, we will have very skinny trees. So in order for plants to have an increase in girth and become woody, they have secondary growth, and that's possible because of lateral meristems. So lateral meristems, we have two: the vascular cambium, which will give rise to xylem and phloem; the core cambium, which will give rise to the periderm, the protective covering of the cell. So for the lateral growth, okay, or the increase in girth, you have the vascular cambium, okay, for xylem and phloem, core cambium for the cork or the periderm, which protects the plant body. Okay, so this lateral growth can be seen in annual growth rings. Okay, so when you cut a tree trunk and count the rings, you're actually counting the layers of secondary xylem cells. Okay, secondary xylem cells. Okay, here. In spring, the tree produces large xylem cells, okay, wherein that enables the cell to soak up lots of water needed. Okay, so the xylem cells produced becomes so throughout the growing season, the xylem cells become progressively smaller. So for the first year of growth, you can find it at the center of that tree cross section. Okay, and then it will continuously grow outward. So new cells are produced every year, and then the most recent years of growth is found on the outermost layer. So thicker rings reflect years of higher precipitation. So those are the layers of secondary xylem cells that were able to soak up lots of water during that season. Thinner layers, okay, thinner rings reflect years of lower precipitation. So if you count how many summers have passed, so that means that the number of that's more or less tells us the age of the plant. Right? Scientists have been able to date weather patterns and environmental disruption based on the size of the annual rings of ancient rings in very old plants and trees. This shows us a view from a light microscope of a portion of a 3-year-old basswood with the scientific name Tilia americana stem in cross-section. So we know that the oldest remnants or the oldest group of tissues are found in the middle, right, in the middle of the stem, and the most recent growths are found on the outermost layers. Okay, the outermost layers. And we see that we've mentioned that we can actually determine the age of the tree if we count the number of rings that it has, because the biggest cells, the biggest cells are usually developed during the periods of high precipitation. So in this case, the springwood, these are the cells that were developed during the periods of high precipitation, and then they got smaller during the periods or seasons of low precipitation. So spring wood is followed by the summer wood, so very few precipitation, then eventually autumn and winter, or fall or winter, very low precipitation. So you have here the thinnest rings, okay, thinnest rings within this cross section. So you can actually count. It says here 3 years of growth. You can count 1, 2, then 3 rings of growth. Okay, you can see there the thinnest layer of tissues formed during those seasons of low precipitation. Then you can also see the secondary phloem develop outside, and then the outermost layer, the periderm, which are actually remnants of the primary tissues as it's being pushed upward as the stem grows with its lateral meristems. The coordination of primary and secondary meristematic growth produces the body of an adult sporophyte plant. So as the plant elongates, it also increases in girth. Okay? So the root system anchors the plants and penetrates the soil, okay, from which it absorbs water and other minerals crucial to its nutrition. While the shoot system, okay, found above the soil, consists of the stems and the branches and the leaves, wherein these are sites of photosynthesis. Okay, so the leaves are the principal sites of photosynthesis. Now, to see more about the relationship between apical and lateral meristems and how the shoot apical and the root apical meristems elongates the plants, I recommend that you watch this video. I'll provide the link in the description below. This is an example of a summary of primary and secondary growth in a woody shoot or woody plant. Okay, so we are looking here at the apical meristem of the stem. Okay, that part of the plant. And as you can see, apical meristem are undifferentiated, actively dividing parts of the plant. Okay, they're actively dividing cells. And the first thing that they give rise to are the primary meristems, which are the protoderm, procambium, and the ground meristem. The protoderm tissues will eventually mature, okay, and differentiate and become the epidermis, okay, or that outermost layer of the stem. Okay, the procambium will eventually give rise to the primary phloem and the primary xylem, and then it will continue on to create the vascular cambium, or differentiate into the vascular cambium, which will give rise to the secondary phloem and secondary xylem. The ground meristem will give rise into the ground tissue and pith and cortex, and then from the cortex it will differentiate into the cork cambium and eventually become the cork or of the plant. And these two are actually part of the periderm. I hope you still remember this from this slide, no? Okay, so the vascular cambium, okay, is found here, which will give rise to your xylem and phloem. The cork, which eventually become part of the bark, is part of the periderm, and they are found on the outermost layer of that stem. As you can see, they are also colored, which will give us an idea on the type of tissues that they will give rise to. So the protoderm, eventually giving rise to the epidermis, is part of the dermal tissues. The procambium up to the secondary phloem is part of the vascular tissues of the plant. Then the ground meristem and ground tissue is part of the ground tissues, while the cork and cork cambium part of the periderm is part of which will become part of the dermal tissues. Now, so what are these three? What are these three groups of tissues? So there are three basic types of tissues in plants: dermal, ground, and vascular tissue. Each of the three basic tissues has its own distinctive and functionally related cell types. So the dermal tissue system, okay, so these are the dermal tissues. They are found on the surface of the plant, okay? They are the ones who are in charge of protecting the inner tissues of the plant and also connects them to the outer world. So it's similar to our skin, okay, in animals, in humans. The ground tissue of plants include all the tissues that are not dermal and not vascular. So everything that's not dermal and vascular, that's part of the ground tissue system, it can be divided into further different types of tissues. Now, vascular tissues, so this could be, this could be the rest of our body if we compare it with animal bodies. So the vascular tissue is made up of the complex, right? It's the complex conducting tissue of the plant. So this is similar to our blood vessels, okay? So the primary components of the vascular tissue system would be the xylem and phloem. They are the ones who are responsible in transporting fluid and nutrients all throughout the plant. The three tissue systems can be found in most parts of the plant. Okay? It shows us the distribution of all these types of tissues in major parts of the plant. So, for example, in roots, okay, if you take a cross section of the roots and look at it under the microscope, you can actually see the vascular tissue system within that cross section, surrounded by the ground tissue, and then protected by the outermost dermal tissue system. If you take a cross section of the stem and look at it under the microscope, you can still see the three tissue systems, okay, although the cells might have differentiated at this point. So you will see here the most distinct vascular tissue system, xylem and phloem. Then you have your ground tissue surrounding it and then within it, and then the outermost layer, the dermal tissue system. Even in leaves, you can actually see the three tissue systems. So if you take a cross-section of the leaf and look at it under the microscope, you can see the vascular tissues within, okay? Surrounded by the ground tissues, then outermost layers are your dermal tissue system. These are the tissue systems and then the type of tissues that they give rise to or that are part of their tissue system. So again, most of the plant body is composed of the ground tissue system. Anything that is not vascular and not dermal is part of the ground tissue system. So this includes parenchymal tissues, collenchyma, sclerenchyma, and then the main function is for storage, secretion, photosynthesis, support, and strength. So again, the actual plant body is mostly made up of ground tissue system. The vascular tissue system, so that's mostly xylem and phloem. So they are responsible for the conduction of water and minerals and support, for storage, for conduction of sugar in solution. Those are the products of photosynthesis, storage of those sugars, and then support and strength. Okay. So again, the vascular tissue system responsible for the conduction of various substances. And then they also function in strengthening and supporting the plant. Then lastly, the dermal tissue system is made up of the epidermis and the periderm. So they give rise to the epidermal tissues, the guard cells, the trichomes, the quarks. They are the protective covering of the plant. Okay, they regulate functions, stomata functions. They also have meristematic cells to form new cells and also for storage. So these are examples, microscopic views of examples of ground tissue systems. So if you look at the microscope, so parenchymal cells will look like this. Okay, so like this, and then they have the cell wall, then the starch grains within. Collenchymal cells for support, and you can see here a thicker cell wall, okay, surrounding the tissue. So if they have thicker cell wall, it makes them they're stronger than other types of cells. Then you have your sclerenchymal cells. Okay, this is how they look like under the microscope, and fiber sclerenchymal cells. Okay, so they also have thick secondary walls. these are more microscopic views. So these are cross sections of the three types of ground tissues. So parenchymal cells, okay, collenchymal cells, they have thickened cell wall. You can see it here, the purple pinkish cell wall, okay, thickened cell wall. And then you have sclerids. So these are clusters of sclerides or stone cells, okay. Okay. Now this diagram shows us the vascular tissue system, so the xylem and phloem. So xylem is mostly responsible for the conduction of water and minerals for the plants. So this is how a diagram, an illustration of the xylem. Phloem is responsible for the conduction of sugar, okay? And this is how they look like, okay? So they have the phloem parenchymal cells are found here, and then they have lateral sieve tubes, okay, sieve tube elements. Now, looking deeper, xylem is the principal water-conducting tissues of plants, okay? So if we look at the close-up of a vascular bundle, here, if you still remember, yeah, so these are the vascular bundles, okay, in stems, and if you look at it closely, right, those elongated shapes are further divided into different type of cells. So the upper part of that are the phloem fiber cap. Then below that are the phloem tissues, and then below that are the xylem. So the xylem is responsible for conducting water. Phloem is responsible for conducting the food, okay, or the products of photosynthesis. Okay, so food conduction in phloem is carried out through two kinds of elongated cells, sieve cells and sieve tube members. So, this is how they look like under the microscope. Phloem, on top of that elongated shape, and then xylem at the bottom. So this is an overview of resource acquisition and transport in a vascular plant during the day. So plants absorb water and minerals from the soil. So this is where they get their water and minerals. And it is being transported by the xylem tissues. Okay, water and minerals are transported by the xylem upward into the plant. And then some of the water molecules are lost in transpiration. Okay, so that's where water molecules leave the water or leave the plant mostly through its stomata. Okay, so that's the function of the xylem. Now we all know that plants perform photosynthesis. So photosynthesis, carbon dioxide is taken up by the plants and used as a raw material in photosynthesis. So the main regions of photosynthesis, or main area or main sites of photosynthesis, are the leaves. So once they have performed photosynthesis and the product is sugar, it's distributed all throughout the plant. So you see here upward, downward movement, and this one is taking care of the phloem. Okay, phloem can flow both ways to distribute sugar all throughout the plant body. Okay, so gas exchange can also happen at the root system, wherein they in cellular respiration, and also the root cells exchange gases with the air spaces of the soil, taking in oxygen and discharging carbon dioxide into the soil. So this is how xylem and phloem work all throughout the plant body. And then I forgot that oxygen is also given off as a byproduct of photosynthesis. Now, to learn more about the functions of xylem and phloem, I recommend that you watch this video from Fuse School. I'll provide the link in the description below. And this one is an interesting video from Verisatium. Okay, why trees are out to get you. Okay, it's quite an interesting video. It helps us understand what makes it possible, what enable plants and trees to grow as tall as they can. Okay, and you will learn a lot from this video. Very interesting. I'll provide the link in the description below. Now these are microscopic views of different types of dermal tissues, the epidermis and the periderm. So again, dermal tissue system, they're responsible in protecting the plant. Okay, so the epidermis, you can see here the collenchymal cells, and then the epidermis on top of that. And then part of the epidermis are the guard cells, okay, that monitors the opening, the stomatal pore. Then you can see here trichomes, or this these outgrowths of the epidermis, and cork cells, which will give rise to your bark of a woody plant. So stomata is the space. Okay, you can see it here, stomata. Stoma is the space between two guard cells, and the guard cells are the ones that regulate the size of the opening. So they are evenly distributed within the epidermis of monocots and dicots. Then you can see here epidermal cells. Then this is the stoma, the opening, and then the guard cells protecting it. Okay, so trichomes, um, they are the ones that secrete substances that can literally glue insects to the surface of a plant. These are found in some types of plants. That ends our video. I hope you learned something new. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and like and share this video. Till next time, goodbye.